Galaxy, the universe, tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling. Galaxy, the universe, tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling.
And on that note, we are going to reset the room. I'll let Hebrew Girl reset, but this room really isn't about the flood. But you can go ahead, Shari.
Okay, so the title of the room is Atheism Rational? Those who are atheists, we'd love to hear your argument as to is it rational or not?
It's completely irrational. The most irrational thing I've ever heard is atheist people.
I'm an agnostic atheist, so I think claiming there is no God is as irrational as claiming there is a God, because I think it's if God, assuming God is some sort of the eternity or creator of all things, I think humans are we must be humble in our limited comprehension, and that we are not omniscient. And so being able to determine, define, and prove things beyond our comprehensions, to me, is irrational. And so I think it's about basically it's as irrational to claim there is a God as there is to claim there is no God. So I think it is irrational to claim there is no God. But I think it's irrational to claim there is a God. So there you go.
I think until someone can demonstrate that the supernatural exists, it's completely irrational to hold the belief that supernatural gods do not exist.
I would. How can you believe in nothing? Like one of the most ridiculous thing I heard from an atheist was we were something about creation out of nothing.
Well, that's a theistic
and at some point,
idea.
everybody. Sorry?
That's a theistic idea. That's not an atheist idea.
What?
Well, there was never nothing in theism if God always was.
Right, but there was a
what did God create the universe out of?
No. What's going on here? What's going on here? I missed Mulder. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that.
So you missed what?
I heard like the last part of I heard the last part of what you said, but I didn't hear the first bit of that. If you could repeat it, please.
Sorry, I lost track. Which part were you? Where did you get cut off?
You answered the question about rational. You answered the question about it being rational, and I only heard the last part of your statement about that.
About why it's rational? Why atheism is rational?
Is atheism rational? You gave an answer. Yeah, is atheism rational?
Yeah, I think it's rational to believe that how can I word this? The existence of gods is contingent on the existence of the supernatural. The supernatural doesn't exist, therefore it's rational to believe that gods cannot exist.
I will propose that atheism, or the lack of a God, is much less rational than the existence of a God, due to the fact that we should always be able to point to the origin of anything, whether we're talking supernatural or natural. So therefore, if you're pointing to an origin, you're pointing to a God, so to speak, because that word God just goes back to a word that means power. So something that animates everything would be the origin point. So it's much more irrational to think that this all just happened, because how does something happen without an origin?
Okay, but you're equivocating an agent with intelligence, a creator agent. You're equating that with a cause.
Yeah.
So how have you made that massive jump?
So if there's a God, correct, how would that not be an origin point?
That's begging the question.
Well, that's what the understanding is, though. If you have a God, that is the origin point of everything that we're talking about. So the question then becomes, if there's no God, was there an origin point? And if there's no origin point, what is the rationality behind this all being here?
There can be an origin point. There can be a first cause. But you're making the jump and saying that first cause has to be a God, a thinking agent who creates things. And I'm wondering how you've made that massive jump.
So the massive jump is made. It's really not that. Okay, so let's talk about this massive jump. We're talking about this plane of reality that we exist upon, that has rules, that has a structure, that's thinking, that's learning. So we're not talking about something that's just a chaotic ball of just doesn't make sense and there's no laws, and everything is very well, neatly ordered, structured. You can actually even tell when things aren't structured the right way and when something's going wrong, because it has a primary structure. So you can tell if something is deformed. You can tell if something is close to perfection. With all of those things that I just explained that we shouldn't even be able to talk about, if this just popped out of nothing, all that exists from an origin point. So when you think about that, you would have to make a massive jump to just tell me that all of that just came into existence at once. We have the laws of gravity, we got brains, and we don't even know how a brain really works, where it came from, we don't know really too much of anything, but we can tell that everything is functioning damn near perfect. And it's almost an anomaly that everything is happening if you don't believe in a God. And even if you don't believe in a God, like, how big of a jump is it to say that all of this exists and that it just happened? That is an extreme jump to make.
Again, it's not. I'm not saying there isn't a first cause. Right? You're trying to mix two things together there. You're trying to mix your original statement and then add other stuff into it. But to say that because you don't understand, or you don't know, or we don't know where minds came from or how any of this stuff works, therefore it must have been a God, that's just an argument from incredulity. Just because you don't understand or know something doesn't mean you get to label it that a God did it.
So,
Peace to the panel.
question is, if there was no human beings, would there still be a God?
Peace. I would say, let's say we continue further with this creation of this Chat GPT, and let's just say we have a Chat GPT volume 50, and it's pretty much able to just have a regular conversation like we're having now on this Clubhouse. Then we have another scenario of alien race or extraterrestrial coming down to reveal to us that, they are the beings that are mentioned in these books and whatnot, Anunnaki, blah, 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 Elohim, and they are responsible for our creation. Either or, it will still point to the fact that it took intelligence to create life.
I think atheism is like kind of useless. I think a monotheism is slightly more useful, and a polytheism. There's a little more detail there. Although I think those are overextending. Still, they're a bit risky.
But see, what Bernie just said, I want to. So Mulder, what Bernie just said, that's where I'm coming from. If everything is intelligent, how do you get intelligence from nothing?
Right. So you're basically making the irreducible complexity argument, right? But let's back up to what Mulder actually made like a very salient point, right? Like, so I'm a theist, but I'm going to recognize like he made some points that were getting addressed, right? So he was asking for he's not arguing over a first cause concept, right? What he's saying is, how do you get from a first cause to a creator and to a supernatural one at that? That's a fair question.
Yeah, do you have an argument for that? That the first creator, do you have an argument for that?
Ask the question in a way that I can, because I'm just not understanding what you're asking.
Sounded like what Mulder was saying is that he's granting, for the sake of the argument, that there is a first cause, which I wouldn't necessarily grant. But in that situation, let's say that there is a first cause to the universe or to whatever. What's the argument that first cause is an intelligent mind that is what you're terming God? Like, what's the argument for that?
Patterns.
So you see patterns, and because you see patterns in intelligence, that means that first cause must be an intelligent mind.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? Because I mean, we see patterns all the time in the world. Your argument is we wouldn't see patterns if it wasn't for a God.
No. So you wouldn't see intelligence if it wasn't for a God. And so when I explain what God was, it's a power. So like, for example, I guess in human terms, if you were to look at like a power source, because God is what my understanding and what many of my brothers' understanding of God is a power source. It is a being, but it is also the source of which everything comes from. But for like in human terms, right? If you had electricity functions in a certain way. So when it animates something, that thing functions with electricity. You understand what I'm saying? The same thing with like wind power, water power. Those are different powers. Likewise, if you have God, that is a power that animates all the powers. It just animates everything. And it's an intelligent animation, though. It's not like electricity is very intelligent, but it's only so intelligent in certain ways. So the fact that you can see these patterns in all the different power forms that we're aware of, and there's probably other ones that we're not aware of, even in the laws in the universe that are there, if like that's what we're trying to explain. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, I understand the words that you're saying, but I don't think that really logically or like deductively or inferentially make any sense. I mean, it seems like you're making like an intelligent design argument. We see intelligence and structure. We see like we see design in the world, and design can only be created by a creator. Therefore, there's a creator.
Okay.
I mean, would that be a fair representation of what you're saying?
That's a pretty fair representation, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you a follow-up on that. So are all things that we see designed? Is everything designed by God?
Yes.
Okay. So if everything is designed by God, how can you tell the difference between something that is designed and something that is not designed, given the fact that everything is designed? It seems like it's an unfalsifiable claim, because if everything is designed...
Slow down. So why... Right. I'm sorry. I have to ask this. So why... I guess... So let me try to get to your train of thought, because I'm trying to understand. So,
yeah, that's fine.
So first off, what would be the reason that I would need to know that something isn't designed? Like, where would that pop up, or how? Like, you know, let's delve into that first.
Can you repeat what you said? Why would you need to know if something were designed?
Wasn't designed.
Because, okay, if everything is designed, but you have no comparison between that which is designed and that which is not designed. So if you look at something and you're like, I need to evaluate whether this is designed or not, because because you think everything is designed, but you have no comparison. You have no way of comparing the design and non-design. Then it's virtually impossible for you to actually determine if it is designed or not. You're making kind of a post hoc rationalization position. You think that God designed everything, therefore everything you see is designed.
Okay.
There's no way for you to really evaluate that intellectually. You have a belief that God created everything, designed everything. Therefore, it's natural that you think everything is designed, but you don't have any way of comparing that design with something that is not designed. So you can look at it and go, okay, that's designed, that's not designed. Therefore, I can tell this thing here is designed because it doesn't look like the non-design thing. You don't have that comparison whatsoever. Does that make sense?
So yeah, so I get what you're saying. That's a lot. So how I would answer that is, okay, in order to, because yes, so basically yes, everything would have to be designed, because in my understanding, so if I break it down back into human terms again, because it took me a minute to catch up to what you said.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm not trying to put you on the spot,
No, but it's a great question.
Tell me what you think. It's fine.
So if you have a computer, right? So, because all this is, if it's designed, it has a designer. The designer's not in it. You know what I'm saying? But he can understand everything that's in it. So let's say you have a computer. If you have a computer, the way that you would know that something's not designed to be in the computer is it doesn't work in the computer. You get what I'm saying? Or like even a virus, for that matter. Like if you designed a virus and you put it in the computer, it's going to work to the end of the virus in the computer. It's going to work to whatever the end of that is supposed to be. You get what I'm saying? Whether good or bad. So which is why I asked you, what's the purpose of knowing that? Because how do you know? How would you even differentiate something that, even if you didn't believe in a God, how would you differentiate that it wasn't designed?
Look, the whole purpose of this is,
the reason I asked that question is because, just real quick, the reason I asked that question is because both of us would come at that point. Both of us would be equally irrational, but what would push the atheist over the edge further into irrationality is, okay, if there's nothing, okay, if we don't know what's designed or not designed, then even further you go to, well, how is any of this even here? Which, okay,
I don't know if I fully understand. Yeah, but my only point here. My only point is that...
Real quick, not to cut you off, but if I can...
Yeah, please, go. That's fine. Yeah.
What he's basically asking for is, so he presented the intelligent design argument, right? And so he's basically asking for the counter argument. So what's the counter thesis to, like, so if it's not intelligent design, what kind of design is it?
Okay, well, this issue of design is kind of a tricky term, because when we say design, the implication is that there's a designer, that there's an intelligence that designs the thing that we're talking about. And so then we get into the issue of like, well, what does it mean to be designed? And what are the hallmarks of design? Some people do say like irreducible complexity. Some people say simplicity is the hallmark of design. So I think that when we as humans, when we look at the world, the way that we evaluate what is designed is we compare it to something that we know is designed, like things that we build. Blueprints that build houses or computers or cars. And we look at that and we say, this is a structure that we know is designed. And then we try to compare that to things in the natural world and say, that thing seems to have a design, therefore it must have a designer. And I think that is fallacious reasoning. I don't think that it falls into like an induction problem, is that if we're just going to try to induce or like use induction to say, well, this kind of looks like this, therefore I'm going to presume that it has a designer. I think we fall into fallacious reasoning in that respect. So now, if the question is how did those natural systems come to be if it weren't a designer? That's a different type of scientific question. I think we have good empirical evidence on why atmospheric systems are the way they are, why physical systems are the way they are, why geochemical systems are the way they are. And I think we have better evidence for that than we do the God position. So I don't think science has all the answers, but I think it's more parsimonious than an explanation that an intelligent being created these things. I think it's just more parsimonious.
But real quick, hold on. So all we have is the natural world to test these concepts. You would agree?
Well, I'm not sure I would agree with that, but that's one of the main ways that we use to test things. I mean, you might use other types of conceptual logic or other types of knowledge systems, but typically the empirical.
We're going to talk about
systems.
proving God. You're not going to accept anything other than something. Correct.
I mean, we could talk about more philosophical positions, but just in terms of the intelligent design piece, then sure, natural systems is probably the best explanation.
Okay, so you summed up what the brother was saying and what Bernie was saying in terms of the intelligent design art, right, and the irreducible complexity concept. So, what natural systems can you point to, right, where it demonstrates intelligent things coming from non-intelligent?
Well, when you said, what do you mean by intelligent things coming from non-intelligent things? Like, give me an example of an intelligent thing that you're referencing. You mean like biological systems?
Sure, anything biological that's animated.
I mean, well, we know through evolutionary theory and abiogenesis and those processes that we have a decent understanding of why we think biological systems came to be on Earth. Now, are they 100%? No, but I think that they're pretty good theories, and I think that they have more explanatory power than the God explanation.
So the question was, can you demonstrate? Right? The word demonstrate.
Well,
something
what do you mean?
Coming from something unintelligent.
Well, we certainly have experiments where we can create, like the Miller-Urey experiments from long ago, were an attempt to recreate abiogenesis. That's an example. We have lots of actual experiments that we can do where we create intelligent components from non-intelligence. Now, they require human intervention, but there are also natural systems where we think that those things occur as well. So I don't know if that's getting to what you're asking, but I would reverse it and say we have some examples of that from natural systems perspective. What examples do we have on the God side?
So can you demonstrate? What example can you give from that side?
Well, I just gave one example, the Miller-Urey experiments.
Hey,
we can also give.
Slow down. On a real quick.
We could also go backwards for examples as well, right?
Whoa. One at a time. One mic. So I'll make sure all the arguments of the people who previously spoke are getting addressed real quick. So Bernie brought up the concept that even if you're going to talk about some experimentation like that, you're talking about intelligence getting involved, which you just said there's human intervention in these experiments. Right? So that's why I pointed to that. So that's why I pointed to natural systems. Us doing experiments is not a natural system. Is not a natural system happening.
Okay. What about geologic systems?
Natural system.
What about like the structure of the Earth, Earth systems, sedimentological processes, how the Earth structures its layers? Would you consider that an intelligent process?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so I think we have a very good understanding of how geologic processes occur, how sedimentary structures form, how through lithification, through other types of like we know how like trace fossil structures are formed. We know how plate tectonics works. Mm-hmm. So those are all natural systems that don't have human intervention, where intelligent structures are formed through a natural process.
So where did they come from? Nothing. That's what we're asking for.
Well, they are formed via emergent properties. I mean, it's like this is like an Earth systems, discussion. I don't know if you know anything about Earth systems.
So the question then becomes, how do those emergent properties come into it?
How did they come to be? How do those emergent properties occur?
Right, because so the basic question on the floor is, can you demonstrate something intelligent coming from absolutely nothing?
Look, this seems like that. This is kind of like I don't want to say presuppositional, but like you're devolving to everything that I say. You want to say, well, how did that occur? How did that occur? Well, how did that occur? I mean, until eventually I'm like, well, that I can't fully explain the occurrence of the previous event. You're like, then that must be God. Is that the argument?
No, I'm not making it. I'm asking that. So the question on the floor, the premise on the floor was the intelligent design, right? So I'm asking you to get the premise for the other, right? And so you have to address the actual irreducible complexity concept, right? So if you're going to demonstrate something came from nothing, like that's the mark, yeah. If not,
well, I don't necessarily have to fully demonstrate all the mechanistic processes to support that position. I just have to provide a more coherent hypothesis that has more explanatory power and is more parsimonious than the alternative. And on the alternative, I just hear, wait a second, I'm not finished. The alternative I'm just hearing is that we see design and therefore inferring God. And on the other hand, I can give multiple explanations of these different systems, but I guess if I can't fully explain it, then you feel that that's not sufficient.
If I may quickly, your explanations is missing. It keeps including the ingredient of intelligence. It keeps including that ingredient.
Right. And so the basic question was, can you demonstrate? Right. So if you want to say you can't demonstrate, you're in the same boat. We are making an assumption somewhere. No issue. I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying, so we both have an irrational position somewhere. We're both making an assumption somewhere. That's not the issue, right? We got to agree on that one.
I don't agree with that.
We're talking about the logic and how we get there, right? And so if you're coming through, say, hold on, you got to land, and you're gonna let me take off and land. I let everyone take off and land too. Right? So the question was, can you demonstrate the counter premise, right? Like, so if it's not something intelligent designing, can you show us something? Can you show us intelligent things coming from something non-intelligent? And so that's why I have to keep asking what came before and before and before, because you got to demonstrate at some point it was something non-intelligent that created everything.
Well, okay. What would end up happening is at some point I say, I don't have an explanation for that, which I think is a very rational and reasonable approach in terms of the discussion. Now, my question to you is, are you willing, from the God religious perspective, willing to say the same thing, that you just don't know?
I'm going to let the supernatural people talk, because I don't do the supernatural God.
Let me.
Okay, because I think that I would agree with you that when we get to these certain axioms, foundational axioms of where's our reasonability come from, where's intelligence come from, certain types of origins, there are some things that we lack knowledge on that we may not ever be able to explain. But I don't think that lack of explanation is a gap that can be filled with God. I think that the atheists or agnostic atheists, whatever you want to call people, who say, I think that the explanations are naturalistic, but ultimately I may not be able to explain some things, is a more logical and more reasonable position than somebody that might say, I have absolute certainty that it's a God that is the cause or the initiator for that intelligence and rationality. That's okay.
No worries. Let's take God off the table. Let's take God off. Let's talk about intelligence and unintelligence. Right? So,
I think it's easy to take God off the table, but this seems to be a discussion where many people originate with a God position.
So the title of the room is does atheism make sense, right?
Is atheism rational?
Right, is it rational? So is it rational? Is it rational to see intelligence everywhere, right? Design everywhere, like people are talking about, right? and then assume something unintelligent created. What's rational about that?
Well, the title of the room is Atheism Rational? Rational being in accord with logic or reason. So the question is somebody who, like as an example for myself, my position that I don't see sufficient evidence that a God exists, so I don't believe in a God, that I think that is a belief that is based in reason and logic and conforms to logic. So I think that it is a rational position to say, I don't see sufficient reason that God exists, therefore I don't believe in God. I don't see sufficient evidence.
I'm going to need you to answer my question because I just asked you to take the word God off the table.
I was just addressing the room title. So
I can answer how evolution explained intelligence, if that's what you're looking for, or the evolution of the brain. How about the eyeball? Do you think that's irreducible? Or we could start with that. But basically there are progenitors that had for example, with the eye, you have progenitors that could only sense if it was light or dark and didn't have a lens. And it's pretty easy to get a lens. And then if you look at a fly, it's got a very small brain. And so the human brain just didn't come, it's not like we came from the head of Zeus, right? Created in one piece. It happened over multiple billions of years. And basically there are mutations, and some of them make it so you have more grandchildren that survive, and those mutations, are favored because they reproduce. That's what having grandkids is about. And so there's an advantage for some animals to be smarter. It doesn't happen in 1 second. You can look at Homo before Homo sapiens, and you can see that they're smaller brains. You can also see that the brain wasn't built, de novo, but, you got the brain stem, and it looks very similar to the brain stem of some more primitive animal. Primitive in the sense of an animal that came on the earth before us. And so these things happen over a long period of time, and you can see evolution in action when someone gets cancer. The cells are evolving to avoid the antibiotics, or not the antibiotics, the chemotherapy. You see it with the SARS-2 virus. So that's an example where it's incredibly intelligent and fast-moving compared to what we can do. There's no brain involved there. There's in that particular situation, and yet it can outsmart us in some sense.
So I don't want to cut you, but with all due respect, there's theists who believe in forms of evolution, and there's non-theists who believe in forms of evolution. So
I was just answering your question.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, so putting evolution on the table is technically a moot point at this juncture, right?
No, but that is exactly the.
Well, and there are also
there
are theists who don't believe in intelligent design, right? There are theists who don't believe in intelligent design.
Your question was, how can one explain the brain, for example, if it wasn't designed? And this same thing was there was
no. My question
an intelligent designer.
No. My question was, can you show me something that arises, like an intelligent thing that arises from absolutely nothing?
Well, an intelligent designer proponent said the flagellum was an example of something that was irreducibly, you couldn't take a part out of it, and so there was no progenitor part that was useful. And so people looked into it and found out that isn't true. And then, of course, there's always going to be the God of the gaps, where people are going to say, if science can't explain it right now, then God did it.
So respectfully, the question on the floor was, and I'll let it go after this, just so I can let people be clear on what my question was. Like, so I was pointing to the title of the room, right? And so I asked the previous brother, like, so you're saying it's rational. It's more rational to look at things that are intelligent all over the place, and things that produce intelligent things reproducing intelligent. You're saying it's more rational to assume that comes from something unintelligent. And what do you mean by intelligent? It seems like you're equivocating. Hold on. I'm gonna land my plane like I let everyone else do. Because the intelligent design argument is it's more rational to see those things and then make the assumption. Because again, I already see the point that we're both making an assumption, right? So there's an irrationality to both positions somewhere, right? The question is it more rational to look at those things and assume intelligence or unintelligence?
I think that's kind of a false dichotomy, actually, and I don't think that the two.
I want to answer his question. Answer his question. He asked me a question, please. So, you're trying to solve the problem of how did simpler things, make more complicated things in terms of intelligence. Well, a God doesn't solve that problem at all. It makes it much, much worse. Because you can't tell me how that God came into being, to be that intelligent. And yeah.
Hey, can I try to answer his question really quick? You said, how does non-intelligible thing become intelligible, essentially? So, for example, the idea of nucleotides, if you go a little bit lower than that, you can essentially know the atoms that make up those nucleotides. And those things are not intelligible. However, they're essentially when they're in the DNA form, they essentially are able to give rise to intelligible things, right? Would that be correct to assume?
So everything you just mentioned from top to bottom, from the quantum level to the physical, is encoded with something. From the wave function that's encoded with all the possibilities of its collapse, to the DNA, which just literally is its function is the code, recode, all that type of stuff, right? So the question is, looking at all that type of stuff, coding, etc., from top to bottom, from the quantum to the natural, is it more rational to assume? And I'm gonna let other people take it from here. I'm just making sure my question gets properly understood. Is it more rational to assume unintelligence or intelligence?
Galaxies and universe tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling. gravity, the universe tried everything to make it work, but we can't stop. No, we can't stop the sky from falling.